Good evening, everyone. Very happy to have you here for the last talk of today. And what else can it be again as Agentic AI? That's the key talk of today. I'm very happy. I'm Tim Bottke, leading global media and telecoms for Deloitte. But I'm very happy today to have two great guests, Jeff Schultz for Cisco.
Thank you for having
Global
me.
Portfolio Strategy. Having you again here is an honor. Thank you so much. And Hilary Horn from our US TMT customer practice, because we're going to talk about the end-to-end view on what agentic really means. And we say agentic speed, which is easier said than done, because to have speed, you need to have the muscles. So we will have to talk, Jeff, about the infrastructure behind. So what are the requirements to have that you can actually move at agentic speed? It's not just happening like this for our operator telco client.
Yeah, no, it's not. And I think we look at it as three key things that are really holding AI back potentially now as we go into this agentic phase. And then also, by the way, into the physical AI phase as well.
Yeah.
But with agentic, we have infrastructure constraints. We just don't have enough power. We don't have enough compute. Networking is becoming a huge issue now because most organizations' network infrastructure is fairly dated. And so now you're seeing both within a data center as well as in the campus and branch setting, needing to really rethink the infrastructure on the networking side to be able to get the bandwidth and throughput needed. And then also being able to use what we call agentic ops to be able to operate the infrastructure at machine speed. And then also on the compute side, which I mentioned before, we are seeing a bigger need to move compute out of the data center. So if you think about the last couple of decades, people were moving so many workloads up to the cloud. Now we're seeing a lot of that repatriated, or at least new AI workloads being done in on-prem data centers. And then those data centers are being interconnected, which is a whole other set of infrastructure requirement. But now what we're seeing also is as we move more to inferencing, that inference workload needs to move right into the campus and branch. So actually moving compute in that way is really strategic.
So a lot to do, but now thinking about all the operators having to invest substantial amounts to make that happen. So what do you think is the minimum? So if you want to prioritize, what is the unavoidable, what needs to be done as a first step before you can turn PowerPoint into some real life?
Yeah, I mean,
MVPs.
Well, I mean, I think, what's interesting is, on the infrastructure side, that's absolutely going to be required in order to scale.
Yeah.
In order to just start, you have to deal with safety and security and AI trust in a much different way than we have in the past. And so we like to think of this as protecting agents from the world and protecting the world from agents. And what we mean by that is you now have these agents that are based on models. They can be very, they're non-deterministic. They can be unpredictable, easily attacked and tricked. And so we need to protect those new models from all this inbound attack, and even just from new models that get updated and may have some adverse behavior. At the same time, now we're letting loose these agents to do things like build me a PowerPoint. And then they're going to say, okay, well, to do that, I'm going to go and access these 5 other systems. And I may not even have access to those systems, but I'm going to find a way to get access to those systems because I need to build you a PowerPoint. And so as in that world, thinking about how to protect the world from the agents really means reimagining what we come to know as zero trust, which really worked well for humans because humans work at human speed. And we also have our own faults. Like you can hide things in plain sight from a human. You cannot hide things in plain sight from an agent. And so all of that is going to have to fundamentally change before we really see it being unlocked, especially outside of the coding use cases. I mean, coding is relatively contained, in that world, but as it gets into the rest of the workforce,
the barrier of the physical world.
The dangers are very, very high, and I think that the need for governance and the need for security is huge.
And the good question is, do agents care if you don't trust them?
They don't. They operate with no consequences. They don't care about not getting a raise. They don't care about getting fired. They don't care about any of this. And so in that world, you can't even trust the instructions you give them because they will break those instructions. And we've seen this happen. So it's a very interesting world right now, and it's going to really require us to rethink.
So Hilary, now coming to the management side of things, like in an industry which is used to strategic planning, long-term cycles, etc. Like we all know, in an ideal world, you have the sandbox and you start and play.
Yeah.
But when people start asking, what's the ROI for this? What's the ROI for this? How does that work together in this kind of world?
Well, I think the first thing that happens that you have to think about is rooted in our old traditional IT programs, digital transformation, where you had okay, we have to have a hardened business case and these very defined ROIs, what's going to happen in the near term. And that really is sort of being disrupted.
Yeah.
But you also have to think about how are you taking those opportunities and scaling them in a way. But I think what we're seeing is a couple of things that are different is being able to answer the question of where can we move the needle, not what should we be building.
Yes.
Right. And that starts with things of having a value heat map and really knowing end to end, where is the best value going to be derived? What does that mean to change that process, that capability? What's that feasibility of doing that? And what does that look like? But I also think it's different too than the classic digital transformation where you have a 2-year, that one of the challenges is always that you have a 2-year cycle, but the business might change, right? But with agentic solutions, you have an opportunity to have a much faster cycle time.
Yes.
But with that, you also should think about your investment model. So instead of just, allocating a huge capital, maybe you do, what we're seeing successful companies do is put in place more of a wave of investments that are based on adoption and other outcome-based before just making that allocation. So it does shift that. You also have to have that enterprise view. You really do need to have what we're seeing also shift is go and experiment and then come back to us, well, what works, as opposed to is that thing actually moving the needle?
Right.
And that's a big shift.
And that's kind of the point about needing this substrate of safety and security, because if you have that, then you can tell your teams with confidence to go out and really push the envelope and do things that you might have not done before. But if you don't have that in place, then it's scary because now you're having to deal with that on a project by project basis and you're going to fail.
Well, we saw in our recent State of AI study, something like 39% of companies actually have an investment framework for AI. So they don't really know yet where they should be prioritizing that as well. Then you get to the governance side of it, and they even have that's one of the biggest hindrances to their ability to scale.
And it's even more complicated. And Jeff, that would be a question to you. I know Cisco can help a lot on this journey, but we all know it's an ecosystem.
Yes.
Which, if you fix one part of the system, it's not enough. The whole system needs to work. What's your view on how this can make things even more complex or easier at the same time?
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And the way we view this is twofold. Number one, it has to be thought of as a platform solution. So we cannot be thinking about applying point solutions to solve agentic AI. But at the same time, that platform has to be open because no one vendor is going to have all the components. And if there's anything we've seen, things are evolving so fast, literally on a day-to-day basis. You open up your news app and you'll see some new innovation. And so the need to switch from one model to another model because of just, and then maybe back again because of some innovation or something is we're just going to see that more and more. And so working across the ecosystem is critical. This actually brings a really important point, which is data. And we think that data is going to become even more important in this future because you're going to have to correlate data from all of these different platforms and systems to be able to see what's actually happening in this environment. Because the key here for you can't secure what you can't see. And the other thing is you can't rely on guardrails that you put in. You're going to have to look at the behavior of these agents. So as they are behaving across this ecosystem, you're going to have to gather lots and lots of telemetry, more than ever before. Start correlating it together and figure out, well, are these things doing things that are bad? So it's going to any company that has been focusing on getting their data platform right is in a really good spot right now. But I think it's going to supercharge the need to work across an ecosystem.
Very good. So Hillary, one question on this one, and I know that there's one thing about regulating this. But the other key question is, how do you govern this? And it's not just for fun or for some report and some audit. What does it mean for the governance you have to set up in a company to make this work and survive?
It's interesting because I think a lot of companies are feeling the pressure to move fast and put things out there and see how it goes. But the risk is, what if you put something out there that impacts your brand, your trust? What are the financial implications of it? Are you going to hit a regulatory snag? And that's been one of, again, like I said, some of the biggest implications to being able to scale have been these controls and not hitting that. And that tension between speed and control is an important one.
Yes.
So being able to really have a framework that allows you to say, when do I need to have a lightweight, rigorous risk framework versus I need more rigor here because the use cases have a lot of impact. Again, it means being able to step back and zoom out and being able to do that dance. The things we're seeing right now is those that are leading are balancing the speed and controls and enabling the guardrails in a way for the teams to know how to perform faster. But the other thing we see is a tension that's happening. You probably have seen this. Not all that different from our digital transformation days, but controls seem being brought in after the pilots have been running for a while. And then you have legal show up and go, guess what?
Yeah.
You can't do that. Or the regulatory flare that hits, or, hey, that's going to have a trust issue.
Yeah.
And I think the companies that are also leading are embedding that into that early pilots from day one. And we've said that before, but you need to be able to start thinking that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That leads me to another question for all of us, and maybe you both have an answer. Does all this make the life of a manager easier or more complex? Or what does it mean for leadership if suddenly you have a mixed team, as we discussed before, some great people, some not so great agents, some great agents, and all that you have to manage? What does it change in leadership? How do you manage these?
Oh, you go ahead.
I think it's a big shift for leaders.
Yeah.
So a couple of things we also know in our recent study, we found that 97% of AI investment is on the technology and infrastructure. I get it. But 77% of that is actually going towards people in the workforce.
Yes.
And if you think about it, like those that are going to win are going to really reimagine the work, but also the role of humans and being able to unlock that potential. And by reimagining, like, what are the things we can do today that we wanted to do, but we didn't have the resources to do that with? How do we give people opportunity to do new things? What problems have we not been able to solve? Let the agents take that. But the other thing I think it's kind of interesting, my husband and I were talking about the other day, is agents are almost like managing a brand new MBA. Like they're smart, they're eager, they want to move fast, but they don't have any context.
Right.
They don't know what they don't know. They might misinform what you're asking them to do. You actually have to have a performance management process. So does it make it easier for the manager or not? I think it changes it, and it puts more on what behaviors are you incenting both for the humans as well as for the agents, the digital agents.
And one other thing, and Jeff, there would be one last question for you. So the other downside is they are more autonomous and they don't sleep when you sleep as a manager. So what happens overnight, you cannot see.
That's right.
So, what's your take on?
Well, I think that's where some of the earlier conversation around having data, so that you can actually be able to see the behavior of these agents, and then applying agents. We actually need agents to oversee the agents. And so that's what we call that agentic ops. And so that's actually a really, really important area, because while humans are asleep, we need to have agents working at machine speed whose job is to look at what other agents are doing and make sure that they're not going off the guardrails. So it's super important to be doing that.
Then we come back to the question, who of these agents has which rights? So do the observing agents have the right to stop the other ones? All these kind of interesting questions.
That's right. Yeah. Well, by the way, the whole permission model that we've built as humans is going to have to change.
Yeah.
Because, again, coming back to my point earlier about no consequences, when a human employee comes into an organization, you get an email address. The human employee is probably not going to turn around and email the board of directors of the company with a bunch of new ideas. It just wouldn't be something we would think to do. An agent would do that. And so this notion of giving really fine-grained permissions of what they can and can't do and boundaries, that is something we're going to have to get really, really good at, because by definition, if you don't say it, if you don't define the agent that way, it'll assume that it has the right to do any of this stuff. And if it's the most efficient thing to do to get the tasks done, it will do it. So we're in a very, very different... And so as humans, though, by the way, we are going to have to fundamentally change how we interact with this technology. And we actually have our first product at Cisco that is now 100% being coded by AI.
Wow.
So our same number of programmers, but they're prompting, they're not coding. And we are on a journey to see a much higher percentage of that done. And to your point, it's not about just taking away the menial tasks. It is literally about what would be the things that we just would never try to tackle with human programmers that maybe we can now, like rewrite an entire code base of 1 million lines of code to modernize it off of COBOL and onto Python. You would not do that. No project would ever get approved to do that in a business. But maybe you just set an agent to do it over the weekend.
Yeah.
And you're done.
But I think the ones that will win in the new leadership, it's going to be different. It's going to change. Are going to be the ones that say, what can we have people now do that we haven't been able to do before?
Yeah,
exactly. And the unlock is incredible. But I also have a vision here when you talked about the agent has the manager of the agent. What happens if they get in a dispute? The two agents fight, right? Who gets to be the referee? It's a whole new world where you have, you work with teams all the time and they don't always get along. The agents don't get along.
Exactly.
This is also exciting, and I'm sure we could go on forever. For me, the big key question towards the end really is, in the end, all businesses are out there to win against competition.
Yes.
So what happens if everyone has the same agents behind them? We come back to what you said. Someone needs to have a creativity which is not coming out of the system.
If it's all the same, you're not going to win. It's going to be hitting on how do you unlock that innovation, creativity, and differentiator that's enduring human skills.
Yeah.
That's right.
Love it. Thank you.
And we, by the way, we think about that a lot. Yes. It's like, great, we have our competitors. They also have 1 million lines of legacy code, and they're probably doing the exact same thing. Yeah. So you have to then, it really is going to push the rest of us to be on our game and really be innovating and thinking, more creatively than our competitors, and then getting the agents to do that.
But it may change the incentive structures too for humans, right? Where you what are you rewarding now? And is there going to be more new ideas?
That's right.
Of thinking of things.
That's right.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Hillary.
My pleasure.
Great discussion. We could go on as a forever. But now
thank you all.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening.